Earnest money. Let's talk about that. Hi, my name is Tonya Bird and I'm with Keller Williams Realty Atlanta Partners in Peachtree City, Georgia. And today we are talking about the who, what, when, where, why, and how of earnest money and how that pertains to a real estate transaction. So let's get started. So what is the earnest money, and is it really required to put any earnest money down? Well, no, it is not required to have a binding contract and put earnest money down. However, by putting earnest money down, you as a buyer are showing that you really want to buy this property. You've got some skin in the game and you're ready to move forward on this contract. And from a seller's perspective, it means that the seller has a little extra layer of protection so the buyer can't back out for just any old reason. They could potentially lose their earnest money if they back out, depending where they are in the process of the contract. So how much money do you have to put down for earnest money? Well, I like to go by my little rule of thumb, which is 1%. So usually you put down 1% of the purchase price. So for example, if you're purchasing a $300,000 home, your earnest money deposit would be around $3,000. Well, who gets to hold the earnest money? Well, that's negotiable on the contract in the state of Georgia. And there's really two entities that hold on to earnest money. That's either going to be the brokers who are involved in the transaction or the closing attorney. What you need to know about the holder of the earnest money is the holder's the one who gets to look at that contract, and if it falls apart, they get to determine where the earnest money is going to go. So you should choose your holder carefully. So when is the earnest money due? Well, that all depends on what was negotiated in the contract. But in the state of Georgia, it's either due up on the day that it binds or it's due a couple of days after. I like to put 3 days after binding out there, mainly so that we can get the check together and get it turned into who the holder is. So at what point during the contract could you potentially lose your earnest money as a buyer and the seller gets to keep it? Well, it all depends on where you are in the timeline of the contract and which contingencies you have written into the contract. In Georgia, we have a due diligence period. And that's at the very beginning of going under contract. It's a period of time in which the buyer can back out for any reason whatsoever and get the earnest money back. This is when all the inspections happen during the contract to make sure that everything is good and you've got all your repairs negotiated. And at any point during that time, whether you've had inspections or not, you wake up the next morning, you don't want the house, you can get out with your earnest money intact. After the due diligence period is over, then it's a little harder to get your earnest money back. You have to go through a financing contingency if you're getting financing, and that financing contingency includes what it takes for a buyer to get the loan personally, and then of course the appraisal contingency for what the house appraises for. And so long as you're within those time frames written up in the contract, if you get out and you say you can't get the loan or the house isn't appraised and you want to walk away, then you get your earnest money back. But if you're beyond those points, then the seller gets to keep it. And then of course there's some other contingencies such as a survey. Some people might write in the contract that they want to have a survey, and if the land doesn't agree with what the seller's presenting, then they could get out of the contract. I rarely see that here in Georgia, although it can be written into the contract. And then of course, if you have to sell your house before you purchase a house and you can't get it sold, then you use that contingency to get out of the contract and get your earnest money back. But again, it really depends on where you are in the timeline. You got to keep good track of the dates in the timeline. And remember, the holder is the one who will look at that if it falls apart and determines who gets what. How is earnest money used? Well, that depends on how you're buying the house. Are you buying it with cash? Are you buying it with a VA or a USDA loan where you're putting 0% down? Or do you have a conventional or FHA loan that you're using? If you're paying in cash, the earnest money can go towards some of your closing costs. And of course, to the overall payment that you're bringing to the table. If you're doing USDA and VA, where it's 0% down, so you're not making any kind of down payment, then the closing costs will be covered by the earnest money, and if there's anything left over, you will get a check and walk away with some money at the table. If you're going conventional or FHA, then it will go down towards the down payments on those loan products, as well as can cover some closing costs. So now you know the who, what, when, where, why, how of earnest money. And of course, if you need help in the greater Atlanta area, let me know. If you need a good real estate agent in your neck of the woods, let me know that too. I can make that connection for you. And I'll see you all later. Bye. Are you digging the kind of content I'm producing? Then be sure to watch this next video. And don't forget to subscribe to my channel. That way, you'll be in the know when I release my next video.